Awesome. Thanks, Ellie. And Ellie, why don't you introduce yourself? Because, like, come on.
Because why not? Hey everyone, my name's Ellie Sanchez. I am an associate for the Rennie Center, and the Rennie Center is super lucky to get to work with the amazing John Crocker and the incredible folks at Bright. Super excited to see you all here, and excited to be a part of the session. And yeah, as we get into this conversation, please don't bash John because he's just a messenger.
A messenger.
Yep.
I'm just going to tell you stuff, and you can react to it. All right. Thanks, Ellie. Ellie's got my back, and Ellie's the kind of person you want to have your back. It's good times. So no, I'm thrilled to be here. Thrilled to start this conversation. Let's kick it off with a little overview of Thriving Minds. Who here is just now hearing about Thriving Minds for the first time? Quick show of hands. Chelsea, Deborah, is it Mishia? Is that correct? How do I say your name? Please.
It's Misha.
Misha. Well, I want to say it right. Thank you, Misha.
Thank you.
Misha is just finding out about Thriving Minds. We are about to blow your mind, Misha. So Thriving Minds is a collaboration between MASMHC, Massachusetts School Mental Health Consortium, Bright out of Brookline Center, and the Rennie Center. We've joined forces and we are putting out a training series on building comprehensive school mental health systems. This is part of that training series. And today we're going to really talk about staffing models, staff utilization, oversight of clinical staff. We're going to talk about the ways in which we have perceived of how to position staff to help kids. And we're going to unpack that. We're going to have some conversations. Again, we're going to adopt a growth mindset here and lean into the idea that maybe the way we've been doing things for the past 20, 30 years could use some updating. Maybe. Let's see. So what position are you currently filling and what district organization are you representing today? Type away, friends. What we got. BJ, thank you, sir. Director of Pupil Services and Sandwich. We got school adjustment counselors here from Newton South High School. Chelsea, Arlington, Lauren from Everett. Awesome. So we got some practitioners. We also have some administrators. This is for everybody because at the end of the day, administrators are going to get something out of this session such that they can start to think about designing a staffing model that maybe brings into fruition the most leveraging of staff and people in the role doing the work. We need to orient to what the requirements are for this work and also to move forward your team. So love it. What are you hoping to gain today? Come off mute for this one. What do you want to get out of this session? You're taking time at 3:30 on a Wednesday.
This is Deborah McGovern. I hope to gain some better understanding on how we can work with less people and do the same jobs and meet our students' needs. Wow, and I also have a grant that I'm working with Bright and consultation through the School Health Mass Department of Public Health to specifically work on stabilization and reentry.
Awesome, Deborah. Love it. I'm hearing efficiency. I'm hearing leveraging staff such that we can efficiently provide services. And my God, we got to do that like real quick because we got 2 to 3 times more kids that need help after the pandemic. What else? Other thoughts? What do you hope to gain out of today? Brenda offers the best way to leverage staff with rising need and several new staff members, including SACs. Cool. Love it. Concrete strategies to improve programming. Very cool, Chelsea. Thank you for that. Let's get one more perspective, one more hope for today. I'll wait you out. I will wait you out. All right, Lisa offers strategies and interventions to support the diverse and increasing needs of our students. Cool, Lisa, like it. All right, get into it. Yes, let's go. Again, I love this quote. The most dangerous phrase in our language is we've always done it this way. That's terrible. We got to break out of that. We're not going to do ourselves any favors if we just try to usher forward the same system year after year that we know isn't necessarily working for our kids. It's not going to work, okay? We're going to discuss some ideas and approaches that you might not be familiar with. It's going to challenge your beliefs and systems and your cherished beliefs about what a staffing model looks like. Lean into it. We have to consider alternative viewpoints. If we're going to embrace innovation, we need to lay waste to the status quo, unfortunately. But if it's in the interest of our kids, if it's the best thing to do for our kids, then we have to be cool with that. It's about our kids. And at the end of the day, how we position staff, how we use our staff has grave implications for our kids. Make sense? Okay. Also, these aren't mandates. You could go back after this session and say, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm just going to keep doing it this way. And that's fine. These are suggestions. These are ideas. I hope it will prompt some thinking and reflection. That's the goal today. I don't want you to leave here feeling like you didn't have to think at all. I want you to consider some alternative viewpoints. Let's start in with this. Traditional view of school mental health centers around some misconceptions. This is one of them, that if I make a referral to a community-based mental health agency, that is going to resolve the mental health problems faced by my students. That model is called refer and hope. We have proven that that model does not work, unfortunately. And the reason it doesn't work is because, my God, they're working real hard in the community. They are overburdened right now. Who here has seen 8-month waiting lists? Yeah. Who here has seen 1 to 2 year waiting lists? Anybody? Yeah. Who here has seen no waiting lists because they stopped doing it because it's not worth it anymore? Yeah. So I'm going to talk about community-based mental health, but I want to be upfront that I love them. Love our community-based mental health friends. Part of the solution, not the solution. How about this one? School mental health staff are not the primary service providers for students who require mental health services. Well, friends, I've seen in a lot of situations that that is exactly the case, that our kids have no other options save for the school-based mental health staff at their disposal. That's simply true. A lot of times we end up being the primaries. Got to lean into that. We have to take the onus is on us to adopt that perspective and to be okay with it. Help, friends, is not on the way. We're it. So we got to own that. This other piece, even if we want to address mental health in schools, school mental health staff are not trained to administer therapeutic services to students. Not true, friends. I'm going to show you that in black and white this afternoon. I think that the traditional view of guidance counselor has persisted in schools for an awful long time. It certainly lives on in the community. Think of your families who have kids in your schools. Did they have any other experience other than a guidance counselor typically? Not really. Most of them had the experience of a guidance counselor. Now, I don't want to knock guidance counselors, but I do want to be real about the fact that training programs have changed dramatically. We're pumping out master's level clinicians now who have training to do evidence-based therapeutic work. But that's not universally known. That's not something that people just kind of like picked up randomly. Even people working in the field have not necessarily kept up with the change in training programs. Nationally, there has been a tendency to maintain a traditional view of guidance counseling, That's not doing us any favors in terms of leveraging our staff for all that they can do, because they can do an awful lot. We're also the situation is made even more complex by the fact that there are large disparities that exist related to how we use our staff between districts, between schools in the same district, between service providers in the same department in the same school. Is this resonating with people? Do we see this happening? Give me a quick thumbs up if you're with me. Okay. I want to make sure you're still here. So let's talk about community-based mental health. Our friends, but those who we cannot burden with mental health writ large as being the only service providers in the land. Not possible. I think that we can leverage community-based mental health to a degree. I hope we will. I think probably it's the case that some of you have tried to tap into community-based mental health. How successful has that been recently? Seeing people shake. Chelsea's giving me one of these. I don't know what that is, Chelsea. It's not an affirmative. How about that?
It was a so-so.
It's a so-so. All right. Anyone else? Anyone else having a great experience? No? Okay. Then let's be real about that. Let's know that that's a thing that we have to contend with. It's just the reality. So here are some barriers. You tell me. Does this make sense? Financial insurance problems being a barrier to getting community-based mental health, time out of work for students and parents. Have you ever asked an adolescent to do anything not fun after school? It's a non-starter. It's an absolute no. Childcare could be end game for services. Transportation, you're out. Mistrust, wait lists, unfamiliarity with service providers. Any one of these things can be the end of services for a kid if we're leveraging community-based mental health only. Let's add some fuel to the fire. These are national show rates for community-based mental health. So this is the rate at which students show up to community-based mental health sessions over the course of 12 weeks. I want to orient you to the graph where 28% of kids don't make it to their first appointment. Refer and hope doesn't work. After 3 months, 9% of kids are still enrolled in services, meaning 91% of the kids that broke into services in the community are gone after 12 weeks. It's over. Quick test, quick quiz. What's the minimum amount of care that is typically required to move the dial on mental health if we're implementing something like cognitive behavioral therapy? How many months? Deborah's offering 6 months. There you go, Deborah. I see anywhere in between like 3 to 6 months. So we're getting 9% of kids minimal care as the model that we go to. That's pretty terrible. Fair? Okay. This for me just, underscores the fact that we can't assume anyone else is going to be doing this work. We can't assume that it's just going to work out if we put a referral in. Sometimes it works out, but a lot of times it doesn't. I want you to imagine a set of 100 kids, okay? There's a group of 100 kids. You're with me? You can count to 100? Beautiful. We know from research that 50% of those kids will never be identified. That's sad to start with. We're starting with 50 kids that will get services of the 100 that need services. Still with me? Okay. 75% of services for kids happen where? Schools. Already. So we've got 50 kids that are going to get services, 75% of those in schools, which means you've got about 12 kids of the original 100 who will break through all of these barriers to get to community-based mental health. Then what happens? This happens right here. It means that about 4% of students will receive care in the community such that they are persisting in services long enough, of the original 100. Schools are the primary source of mental health support for kids. That's it. That's it. We are the prevention arm of the mental health system writ large. We got to own it and stop pretending like someone out there is going to do the work for us. Okay? Here are the advantages of school mental health. It's basically a retort to all of the disadvantages of or barriers to community-based mental health. We're cutting through wait lists, greater generalizability of treatment to the child's context, meaning that it's in the place where they're struggling the most sometimes. It's also leveraging people that they already know. It's efficient, it's productive for kids, it's cost effective. We are uniquely positioned to provide services to kids, more so than any other institution. Just got to own that. Let me hit pause real quick. Sinking in? Are you with me? What questions do you have so far? Questions are good. We like questions. It means you're engaged. Okay. Keep going? Keep going. Okay. So, like, why do schools need to address mental health concerns directly? Again, we're uniquely positioned. Direct, consistent contact with students. We talked about transportation being something that can be the end game of services for students in the community. We've got a captive audience. They are definitely making it to school. And if they're not making it to school, that's a different problem. But for those making it to school, we can at least provide that care. Access to services on an ongoing basis. We're talking about a team of individuals that can provide insight. When I think of our that are providing support, I think that unfortunately they're at a disadvantage sometimes because it's the kid's perspective, maybe the parent's perspective a little bit, if they can get someone on the phone and maybe there's a little bit of like feedback from the school. But like when we're in the mix and we're providing the services, we've got at the high school, for example, like a team of administrators that knows the kid and 7 teachers potentially. Oh, and then the parents are in direct contact with us all the time. And then we've got these other service providers that are always talking to this kid. It's just like we know what's going on in a very real way. I think it's also the case that we need to justify why this is important for all our stakeholders. Mental health is good because it's good. I don't need any other reason to justify why we would pursue such an outcome. However, it's also the case that kids don't achieve the academic and post-secondary gains that we want for them if we don't provide them the services and supports that they require. That's it. Investing in mental health for kids mediates every other outcome that our stakeholders care about. You want a strategy to improve MCAS scores? I got you. Invest in mental health. You want a strategy to improve the behavioral outcomes of kids and reduce suspension? I got an idea. How about some school mental health? That'd be good. It literally mediates every single outcome. You got to invest in it. This last bullet's a sad one, but it's also true. We are the de facto mental health system for youth, followed by juvenile justice. We know that the school to prison pipeline's a real thing. We also know that when we fail to provide mental health services to kids, the other response is typically what? Suspension, exclusionary discipline practices, not good stuff. What happens when you suspend a kid? What are you ensuring? Who's got the answer? Come off mute.
Failure.
Part of it, Deborah.
They're not learning.
Not learning. You know what this is like in the research a lot. You suspend a kid, you know what you're guaranteeing? That you'll suspend them again. It's gonna happen. It also does nothing to build skill. Sorry, operant conditioning was not designed to change behavior. It's not a thing. We've got archaic disciplinary practices. Throw them out. Go talk to Stuart Avalon. Collaborative problem solving. Love it. All right, let's keep going. And yeah, you know all this stuff, right? Because you live in this world. It improves academic performance, standardized test scores. We decrease crisis, we increase attendance, we reduce behavioral concerns, we decrease substance use. If the main venue for mental health support is school, says Mary Alice, how do we address the issue that it is a challenge to get to the real issues of what is impacting student progress within the school day? Yeah, Mary, you got to make time and space for this stuff. You have to prioritize it. The order of operations is not like academics and then mental health. It's, you got to take care of needs first, prioritize it, give it time, give it energy, then you can really move the dial on academics. If the issue that you're bringing up, Mary Alice, is like, man, how do we, it's a challenge to get this stuff to happen during the school day, then that in my mind is a challenge of prioritization. We're not prioritizing the right things first. Hope that helps a little bit, Mary Alice. Apologize. Okay, so friends, mental health problems are pervasive. I didn't drop slides in here to show you the number of kids that are struggling right now. It used to be 20% of adolescents would experience a mental health problem of mild to severe impairment. Now it's skyrocketed. Local numbers in Methuen, about 35% of kids scored in the moderate to severe range for anxiety or depression or post-traumatic stress at the high school last year. That persisted into this year to a degree. Who wants to guess the number of kids that scored in the severe range across every blessed measure?
Severe range, did you say, John?
Severe in all three categories. What do you think?
50%?
50, I just told you 35% scored moderate to severe. My God.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that one then.
That's okay. Chelsea offers 15%. Chelsea, well played. 17%. 17% of all kids at the high school last year scored in the severe range on a measure of anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. That's miserable. That's absolutely out of control. A third of the population needs mental health services and supports. My God. What else? Community-based mental health agencies. Love them, part of the solution, not the solution. Can't be. They can't go it alone. We have to be a part of the mix. We talked about this. When we do not act, when we avert our eyes from the problem, when we don't address the needs of kids directly, there's a huge cost associated with that lack of action. All of the outcomes that we care about are impacted negatively. And yeah, we are uniquely positioned. Some will say, yeah, but John, how are we uniquely positioned when my people are telling me that they just can't provide the kind of services that kids need? Well, friends, this is where it gets messy. This is where you're going to start to throw up your hands and be upset. But it's also the part that is the most important of this presentation. But before we go there, some of you have answered this question in the past. So if you've been a part of a presentation where I've asked this question, I'd ask that you recuse yourself from answering. But according to the National Institute of Mental Health, how long does it take on average nationally for an individual to secure mental health services from the point at which they start to experience symptoms of a mental health problem? How long does it take from I'm starting to experience a mental health problem to getting help on average nationally? What do we got? I've got 1 year. Thank you, Deborah. I've got 18 months. Chelsea, way to go. Mary is certainly not Pollyanna, 2 years. I've got 1 year. Thank you for that. 2 years, Mary Alice. Okay. Anyone else? A couple more. I'm seeing anywhere from like, I don't know, 1 year to 2 years. Give me a thumbs up if you're going to go all in on 1 to 2 years. Okay. Do we have consensus here? Okay. Friends, what would you say if I told you it was 8 to 10 years? The national average wait time for a kid to get services after the onset of mental health symptoms is 8 to 10 years. What do you think?
I have to say, I'm a bit surprised by that. However, when you think about the symptoms that the children may experience, they're not letting people know probably those first few years. It's not being identified. They just think they're normal. That's normal. They don't understand that it's not normal. So I can understand that a few years would go by, and maybe not until they reach their teen years that someone really pays attention to that, but potential mental health issue. And then by the time they actually can get in to be seen and see a psychiatrist to get treated, well, yeah, I guess it makes sense. It's very sad though.
Yeah, pretty sad. Other comments? Is this acceptable? Are we okay with this? No, this is miserable. I can't even believe this is the case, but it does happen to be true. How do we combat that? Well, we enact prevention. We've talked about community-based mental health. How much prevention work is community-based mental health doing, honestly? None. We designed it that way. That's our fault. Like, we made the system that way. They react to two things, and we all react to two things typically when it comes to mental health problems. What do we react to? The two things that get us going with mental health problems. What are they?
Suicide and drugs.
Those are very specific things. I appreciate that, Deborah, and you're in the right vein. You are correct, and you'll be even more correct when I offer the answer. Anyone else? Take a shot. What's one of the two things that we react to?
Self-harm.
You're
Not
still
too
correct.
specific. Okay.
Still correct, Deborah. Crisis and diagnosis. That's it. Those are the two things that we react to. We don't look for emerging concerns. We don't get ahead of problems. We don't enact prevention. We are proactive. What we can do is implement things like universal screening so we can look for emerging concerns, early identification, proactive care for kids. And that way we don't have to wait for diagnosis and crisis, because that's a pretty terrible public health model. Doesn't work, clearly. So bear that in mind. Schools are the only place that can get universal mental health screening off the ground. There's no other institution. That's it. Okay, we're gonna have that conversation now. Don't be upset. Lean into this. It's gonna be okay. So I think there are some specific questions that we need to ask when we start to talk about roles and caseloads, like how are we leveraging staff across tiers of support? How are we assigning caseloads? These are seemingly, like, I guess, not meaningless, but like light touch, not really concerning decisions to be made. they have grave implications. If we do it wrong, it's a real problem for kids. Questions like, how do students gain access to staff relative to your staffing model? That's a question to ask, for sure. If kids can only get mental health services if they have an IEP, for example, well, gosh, that's not going to prevent things from getting worse. That's actually going to wait for things to get so bad that an IEP is required. And how efficient, to Deborah's point, she's looking for efficiency, are the caseload assignments and staffing models that we have typically adopted. Let's look. I've got a question for you. Do specific roles in your district manage specific tiers of support? What do we think? Suzanne's nodding, Lauren's nodding, Chelsea, okay. Okay, there are implications to that. We'll talk about them. Mary Alice, at times, okay, so it's not really super defined. I appreciate that, Mary Alice. How about this? Do specific roles manage specific domains of need? Meaning this service provider does academics, Erin does post-secondary, BJ's doing mental health, okay. There are implications to that choice. I'm going to shed some light on that. I want to share. It's not that it's always bad. It can be bad. Sometimes you got to be honest about it. We got to be able to account for it. And then how we assign staff, specific grades, our caseload assignments different between roles. Do you have staff members that maybe start the year with 10 kids and another staff member starts the year with like 300 kids? Seen it for sure. Lots to discuss. Do you see this playing out in your districts? This is a safe space. Seeing heads nod. Okay. Thanks, Clancy. We're going to get into it now, friends. I'm going to copy this link into the chat. I absolutely need everyone's participation on this one, please. You're going to click on the link. And what I want you to do, oops. Wrong link. Wait one. Don't click on that link. That's the old one. Give me a sec. Okay. Here is the new link in the chat. There you go. What I would like to do, friends, is I'd like for you to claim a grid, claim a piece of the grid. So up in this first row, it says district name. Put the name of your district there. And then what I want you to do is I want you to see that there are the 4, we'll have to get into this. I'm going to say 4 specialized instructional support personnel roles. Why am I differentiating between school social workers and adjustment counselors if it's the same license? Because you all do. Not my fault. This is something you do all the time. So I've separated them because sometimes you do, even though they're the same license. What I would like for you to now do is claim a grid and start to check off the boxes. School counselors do what in your district? Check off the boxes for what school counselors do. School psychs do what in your district? Check off the boxes. I want to give you 5 minutes to do this, which means you have to work pretty fast, okay? But we're going to have a conversation about this afterwards. Fair? Does everyone know what they're doing? Does anyone have questions about this? Deborah, what do you got? Oh, you're on mute, my friend.
I'm sorry, I could not find my screen. Now, when I went into it, if someone else is already filling it in, what do you have to do? Make a copy?
Nope, you're just going to claim a different grid. Scroll down.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I missed that part.
No problem. No problem. Just keep scrolling down. You'll find a grid. I want to show you my grid. It's right here. See that? This is Methuen. Okay. This is what it happens to look like in my district. This is what, so you're going to go column by column. You're going to indicate what your people do. I see people claiming grids. I love it. I appreciate it. Good work. DJ, you can't phone a friend, okay? Linda, no problem. You can just react to this, Linda. And Deborah, no problem. You'll gain something from seeing what other people put down. Whoever's on line 70, second grid from the left, just name your district, please, my friend. Give me a thumbs up if you're close to being done. Okay, maybe another minute or so. When you're done, pop a yes in the chat. Thank you, Chelsea. All right, we're moving. All right. Are we ready? So first off, have you ever undertaken efforts to map this out like this before? You ever taken stock of the responsibilities assigned to your staff before like this? What do you think? Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Yes, I've done this. No, I have not done this. Cool, Sarah. I'm glad you like it. Look, it's looking like not a lot of people have done this. Okay. This is what I really want to show you. See that? You with me? See that big grid? This is the grid that collects all the data from all the grids that you all just filled out. This is the aggregate data for all of you. What can you tell me about this data set, friends? Take a hard look. Erin, you nailed it. No consistency. None. What else? Friends, this is an absolute mess. This is real bad. Who here is shocked by this? No. Who here is like, makes sense to me? Yeah. This has gone untouched for years and years and years. Deborah offers counselors seem to take on more roles than others. In some districts, Deborah, sure. In other districts, not so much. For every category that you selected on here, there's another district that did the exact opposite. For every assignment that you made on here for a specific role, there are a bunch of districts that did the exact opposite. What does that tell you about how we're leveraging staff? What do you think? Come off mute. All districts have different needs, different resources, and different role expectations. Mara, great. Love that reflection. Doesn't make sense, but it's no surprise. Thanks, Paula. Yeah. I guess one of the things that I want to point out here, which was really surprising to me when I first undertook this activity, and I've got cop cars behind me, so just let that fade. There we go. We broke the mold today, friends. Look at the first row. If there was any consistency that I thought I would find, it would be that, yep, school psychs do special education eligibility testing. I'm seeing that that's just simply not true in every district. That blew my mind. The one consistent feature that I thought would emerge, broken. You broke the mold. What I hope you'll gain from this, sincerely, is that you likely are under leveraging every single one of your staff members. You are likely not utilizing the skill sets and knowledge and training of all of your staff members. What do you think about that? Who here did not check off individual and group mental health counseling for school counselors? Chelsea, elucidate us.
The model that my school has often used has been kind of a refer to social worker model pretty immediately when a student I mean, like, I don't want to not say our school counselors are doing any counseling, that's unfair, but it's often like if a student is referred to a social worker, even after just like one session with the school counselor.
Chelsea, super helpful. I think that probably that feeling would be shared by others. I'm seeing Lauren nod, like, yeah, I get it. But what about the 12 other districts that said, no, man, we use them for sure? Food for thought. You know what I mean?
I would love a new model.
So I don't mean to pick you out, Chelsea, but
no, totally.
But I think, like, for me, take a look at your own grid later on and compare it to the aggregate. What are you not leveraging from your staff? What could you be asking them to do? That's the purpose of this activity, is to think about the ways in which we are perhaps pigeonholing staff based on our local decisions. No one else told us to do this. This is our fault. We need to think outside the box a little more. Mary Alice, go for it. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how we're defining school counselors. So we have like guidance counselors who are like, college and career readiness versus like, a home for little wanderers counselor who's providing more like of a therapy. So can I get some clarity around that?
Totally, Mary Alice. When I talk school counselor, I'm talking a licensed DSE school counselor. And we're going to find out in a hot minute what they can and should be asked to do. So I think the important thing to remember here is that guidance counselor is not a license you can even get anymore. It's not a thing. That idea, and I referenced this earlier, has persisted for years and years and years, beyond the point at which you could get a guidance counselor license. We still think guidance counselors are a thing. According to DESE and the school counseling and the licensure board for the state, it's not a thing anymore. You can get a school counselor license, you can't get a guidance counselor license anymore. However, Mary Alice, to your point, districts can adopt a viewpoint of school counselors that matches up real pretty with what a guidance counselor used to do. That's persisted over time for sure. So we'll get to the specifics of what school counselors can for sure do, Mary Alice. I think it will help to paint a picture of what can be done. Oh, good, it makes sense. Thank you, Mary Alice. So I want you to just sit with this. I want you to think about this and how it relates to your model. I'm sure it's going to bring up some questions. Yeah, Mara, you offer in Worcester, counselors perform school and career readiness, and SACs and psychs do other interventions. And that's a model that I see in places. It's also a model that doesn't have to be that way. It's a choice we made, right? And that might be a choice that's okay for your district and that you love it. It's also the case that some districts are looking for a way to leverage more staff more efficiently and to spread the love when it comes to mental health services. And this is the reason we're having this conversation, because we have to, in a time of dire crisis, leverage everyone for our kids. That's it. So I hope you'll take something from this. I hope it will change your perspective a little bit. We're not done with the pushing of buttons and the shifting of perspectives. We're going to get right back into it. But I really love that activity because I think it helps us to understand ultimately that there are other districts doing it differently and successfully, and maybe you could too. Maybe you could shift your staffing model such that you're leveraging school counselors for maybe more than you're doing now. I've also seen, I think it's also really interesting to look at the school psych column as well and realize that lots of districts are using school psychs not just for testing, because I think that's the traditional way in which we view school psychs. It's like, no, they're testers. And the reality is their training is such that they can do all the things too. These are some results from a different cohort of districts that went through this. You can see similar, I guess similar, I don't even know what to call it, a similar disaster, similar lack of consistency, chaos, as it were. So you're not unique in the chaos that you brought to the table. This is shared among all districts that have gone through this activity. Questions, thoughts before we move on? We've got a lot of slides left, and friends, got like 39 minutes. Is that true? Oh my God. Let's keep going. We already did that. So we're going to talk about staffing models. It's tough to call out a staffing model by name. I can talk about it by its components because staffing models are so diverse that I can only really call it out by like, like a certain component of your staffing model might be the way in which you assign caseloads or the way in which you assign tiers of support to specific staff members. So there are pieces of staffing models that we can talk about, but I've, save for the one staffing model that I'm going to share from Methuen, I haven't really found a name for any of these staffing models. So I think it's going to be important that we just reflect on that and realize that there's such a diversity that it makes it really hard to replicate anything because there's no real consistency at all across any district. I also want to call out this piece around clinical leadership and how essential it is to have a seat at the table, how essential it is to be able to usher into existence a staffing model that makes sense and leverages people effectively. I love our friends who are associate principals who are being charged with supervising and evaluating clinical staff. I also think that's really unfair, not only for the individuals who are being asked to do that duty, but for the individuals that are not getting the clinical supervision and feedback necessary, not being leveraged appropriately because these people don't have the background knowledge. I'd be a pretty terrible science department chair. I love science. That doesn't mean I would be a great science department chair and move the pedagogy and content knowledge of the science teachers at the high school. I'm a good clinical supervisor because that's my background. What would happen tomorrow if all of the English department chairs started supervising the math department? We'd be up in arms. That'd be a problem for the state. People would march on Beacon Hill. But we're totally cool with non-clinical staff supervising and evaluating mental health staff. What is that? That's weird. That does not move our system forward. Okay. This is the staffing model that we have designed. I'm offering it as an example and one of the only named staffing models that I can really share with you. Here's the description of this staffing model, and I put a posting in the chat for how we ultimately advertise and market this staffing model to prospective candidates. We do not differentiate between any of the DESE licensed staff members or roles or licenses. Basically what we say is, look, if you're licensed by the state, we know that you've gone through a training program that has readied you up to do all the things. You can provide services and supports across all tiers of support and all domains of need. And if you happen to be a school psych, love it. We're going to assign you a project based on your advanced knowledge with testing. And if you happen to be a social worker, cool. You likely have some strong knowledge about navigating the community-based mental health space. Cool, that's your project. And if you're a school counselor, I'm sure that you have some advanced knowledge around career planning and post-secondary. We're going to leverage that. That's your project. But the core of what you all do is your caseload and the services you provide to all your kids across all tiers of support, case management. You all have a caseload. That has allowed for us to do a couple things. We avoid fractured services. We avoid situations where we have like 3 staff members assigned to the same kid. We also, when we post, are able to post for the entire candidate pool. I no longer have to pick the 33% of the candidates that I want a gun for because I had to post for a school counselor over a school psych over an adjustment counselor social worker. Does that make sense? We're doubling down on the idea that these people know how to provide care across all domains of need and all tiers of support. I've done the work crosswalking these training programs. I'm gonna show you that in a hot minute. And that's where it gets really uncomfortable. But this is what it looks like. We're providing services and supports across all tiers, all domains of need. I won't go into that too much. I think I've described it enough such that you understand. This is kind of a summary of what we ask our people to do. They are providing comprehensive care, case management. It's not go see Mary if you have academic needs and go see Chelsea if you have mental health needs. I think it's adorable when we think that these needs don't bleed into each other and that an academic need actually has mental health components to it and that a post-secondary need doesn't have mental health components to it. Of course they do. And when we can put a comprehensive care plan in place, that allows for us to move the dial on kids' well-being in a more effective manner. Hitting pause. Questions, thoughts? How are we doing at 4:30 on a Wednesday? Are you still with me? Thumbs up? We good to move on? Okay. This just unpacks what I just talked about. Project-based assignments by specialization. I want to honor what people are really good at. I also want to honor what I know they're all good at, which is case management across all tiers of support. That's it. We're going to skip this. We're going to go to this. School mental health training programs and staff readiness. Friends, this is the Mass DESE subject matter knowledge requirements for a school counselor. It was updated 2 years ago. Please orient yourself to items D, E, F, and L. You tell me. And I am a school counselor by trade, friends. So I'm calling people out here. If you asked your school counselors if they were ready and willing to do this stuff, what would they say? What do you think? We'll wait you out. I know it's late in the day. Mary, what you got?
I was thinking about predominantly our high school model, and I would say it really depends on the counselor. To be honest, there are some school/guidance counselors that are perfectly comfortable and equipped and have capacity to address more challenging mental health needs, and there are some that aren't, that are strictly course load and so forth, a more traditional model. At the elementary level, our school counselors are everything. It's one counselor per school, and they wear all the hats.
Gotcha. That's hopeful, Mary. I think it paints a picture that like it's not the same in every district. Again, because like sometimes we don't have our finger on the pulse of what's happening between districts, between buildings, between schools. So some are going to be ready and some are maybe not. I think one of the things that's really important to remember is that these are the requirements. When you re-up your license, you're saying, I'm good to go with all this stuff. And it is one's professional responsibility to be good to go with all this stuff. When you re-up your license, you're attesting to the fact that, yes, I am knowledgeable of strategies used for the prevention and treatment of substance abuse, physical and sexual abuse, the spectrum of mental illnesses, and violence in pre-K through 12 students. Item F. That does not sound like counseling light to me, friends. That sounds like evidence-based therapeutic practice. Guidance counseling license ceased to be a thing a few years ago, Clancy. Some of our staff originally had this license, originally continue to see themselves in this light. Yeah. And I've said this before, but what do our kids need right now? Because it's not about what we want to do, it's about what we need to do, what our kids need for us to do. And our kids right now need for us to be ready to provide this kind of level of care. That's just it. And I'm not picking on school counselors here. I'm just because again, I am one. I'm saying that because of the role of guidance counselor and how that has become conflated with school counselor, it's a unique problem that we need to address because they're not the same thing. And sometimes we see it as the same thing. Does that make sense to people? Okay. So, food for thought. This is a heavy lift. This is evidence-based therapeutic practice. And this is what the state is saying school counselors should be able to do, period. How about this? Massachusetts School Counselors Association. They drafted for the eval rubric specific indicators for school counselors. This is indicator 2E. I guess this is what standard indicator element. This is element E2, the 2E5 for the role specific indicators. The evaluation system that we use for our mental health staff seeks out and implements evidence-based counseling theories and techniques to deliver short-term counseling. What's short-term counseling? Is it 3 to 6 months? It can be longer too. That doesn't say I'm going to check in with kids. That says evidence-based counseling theory and technique. I don't know of a single evidence-based counseling theory that ends in anything other than the dreaded T word, therapy. Sorry, but that's just the way it is. CBT, DBT, SFBT, all the T's. This is what they're being evaluated on, or at least this is what MASCA is saying they should be evaluated on. Their professional organization, mine as well. How about this? Did we know this training programs have changed? Salem State University degree requirements for school counselor or adjustment counselor. It's not even a different program. It's the same web page. Why do we treat school counselors and adjustment counselors wildly differently when it's the same training program? Exactly the same. Not even like it's close. It is a mirror image. It's choose your own adventure. Go through this training program and pick your license. Paul up there. Get into a good college. Guess what happens when we get a kid into a good college and they have mental health problems that have gone unchecked? They drop out after a year.
Oh, yeah. Right, of course. Those of us in this room know the answer to that, but it's a hard sell to the community because that's what they'll say kids need, and I think kids feel pressure to say that's what they need.
Totally, Paula. I'm with you, and I know you know that. We got to sell that other message. It's so much, and you're right. It's hard. It's hard to sell that message. Thank you for offering that. How about this one, friends? Fitchburg State University. What are the differences between programs that prepare school counselors and LMHCs? I got to imagine here that these are worlds apart, right? Like these are totally different programs. There's going to be no overlap. Yet there's the overlap. It's a very messy crosswalk, but it's a crosswalk nonetheless. There is next to no difference between these training programs. It's fake news when we say that school counselors and LMHCs have vastly different training. It's not true. Why do we keep feeding into this? It's not real. How about Assumption, UMass Boston, Merrimack? There's Merrimack's crosswalk. It's the same stuff. Mary, were you going to say something?
I was just thinking, and this is not my wheelhouse, so just, you know, take it for what it is, but I am wondering about, you know, the experience that many counselors bring into their position within a public school setting. So, for example, we certainly have what we would refer to as more clinical focused counselors, or, you know, adjustment counselors, what have you, that have had sometimes years of experience in a more restrictive, challenging setting before coming into the public school. And so, you know, I think, you know, the piece around the license and the education, I think this is really helpful and eye-opening for me. And there's this other piece around experience that folks are bringing into the schools. And you know, just the other parallel I can say is, you know, so 100 years ago when I was, you know, when I was getting my license, it's in special education. Yet my experience before coming into the public school was in a pretty significantly restrictive special education program for students with autism. And so the training and experience that I received there actually positioned me a certain way for the types of roles that I took on when I first started in public school. So, you know, I think maybe the answer to my own wonderings is how we're actually providing training and support to counselors given our current need. But I just thought that's sort of what I was thinking about as you were going through some of this information.
I love that perspective, Mary, because like we can't knock or turn a blind eye to the real value of the experience of our people and what they bring to the table. There's value there too. So I guess my response will be, how are we ensuring professional development, ongoing coaching and supervision and training for individuals that enter the field directly into schools? Because I think that there's value to that too. We can't expect that we can only leverage people who have perhaps had the experience of some other setting. We have to create experiences such that we are readying up and providing ongoing support and training for those individuals who are coming to do the work in schools from the word go. Here's what I'll share. Let's imagine a scenario where we have an individual that goes through a 4-year training program, and we're readying up this master's level clinician, love it. And then what happens? We put them in a practicum placement where they're placed in perhaps a school district that maybe doesn't have the staffing model that supports their ongoing development, maybe doesn't have clinical supervision in place. And there's a process of unlearning that starts to happen, unfortunately. You start to look at all that good training that you got, and it starts to meld into something else. And then we hire these people into a district that maybe doesn't have a clinical supervisor, maybe doesn't have a staffing model that points at doing the things that you learned in your training program. And that's such a shame, because ultimately we're pumping out these individuals from these training programs with excellent credentials. And then we're not supporting them in growing in their career from the point at which they start their practicum to the point at which they get hired to the point at which they retire. That's a shame. In order to combat that, we got to do a few things, right? We need great professional development that is directly pointed at these unique and specialized roles. How many times have you heard, let's just send the counselors to the Zern Math PD. They'll get something out of that. Or why don't we, everyone's going to do the UDL thing, including the counselors. I love UDL, but I would rather send my people to maybe a session on cognitive behavioral therapy or suicide risk assessment. So professional development's key. It's also the case that beyond professional development, they need a supervisor that is going to match with their skill set. They're owed that. It's somewhat irresponsible for us to not provide appropriate supervision and evaluation to these unique staff members who need a different kind of supervision and evaluation. So it's I love what you're pointing out, Mary. I want to leverage people who have great experience to come into our schools too. I also want our people who choose to start in schools to be able to be supported in growing their skill set, so that they can feel really comfortable with their clinical expertise, and so that they can feel like they're supported in making these leaps into clinical practice. It's a both and for me. So awesome viewpoint. Really appreciate that. Okay, here's a question. As a professionally licensed counselor, when can you excuse yourself from further professional development and advancement? Anybody? Never. Never. I saw you, Clancy. I saw you mouth it. Here we go. Desi's lined this up really clearly. At least 15 PDPs in content subject matter knowledge, right? We just went over what that looks like for a school counselor. Every time a school counselor or anytime any mental health staff member re-ups their license, they're reattesting that, yeah, I've done the thing to continue my professional growth over the course of my career. We're never off the hook for it, ever, ever, ever. As a professional in this field, you are a forever learner. If we think that our master's program is the endpoint for our learning, because I've heard that as an argument, like, I didn't learn this in my master's program, that cannot be an argument that we're okay with. Thanks, Deborah. Okay. We've got 19 minutes left. There's no way we're getting through all this content. I do want to share, because we're having really rich discussion. I appreciate that. You're also engaged. I'm going to drop in the link, a link in the chat for this, the evidence-based practice needs assessment. This is something that we developed in order to help you as maybe individuals who oversee departments, or maybe people within a department who want to undertake the efforts of like assessing where you're at with your practice. It's going to help you to do that. It's going to ask about evidence-based interventions. So maybe like very light, actually, let me show it to you. This might be much easier. So we'll see things like contacting home, consultation with teachers, consultation with outside providers. Like everyone's doing that, right? Like those are like low-hanging fruit. Those are simple interventions. They also happen to be evidence-based. We then go into evidence-based programs, things like Second Step, Signs of Suicide, Coping Cat. And we're asking about, like, do you have training? Do you want training? Are you currently implementing this? Where are you at? All the way up to and including evidence-based therapeutic approaches, CBT, TFCBT, REBT, all the T's. This allows for you to get a really strong understanding of what your people are using for evidence-based practice, what they're not using, what they want training on, what they're already trained in, what populations they feel comfortable providing support to. It helps you to build a professional development plan. It also lowers the temperature on evidence-based practice because inevitably people are checking off some boxes. And if you decide to make this an identified survey, then you get one more thing. You find your early adopters, some people that you can leverage to implement things like, for example, CBT. You know, who said, I'm currently implementing CBT? Great, I've got this list of 4 people. I want to talk to them. I want to see how they're using that in their practice. I want to leverage them to maybe spread that within our district, school, team, whatever it happens to be. So I won't have you take this because we don't have enough time, but I do want to show you the responses from another group that took this. And this is the kind of info you get. I want to jump down to evidence-based programs. So when I look at this, Red is interested in training. I can see that I Can Problem Solve it's got some interest. Signs of Self-Injury has some interest. Lots of people want Break Free from Depression or Coping Cat. Well, what are we already implementing? That's in green. I see signs of suicide, PBIS, that's great. Okay, zones of regulation. Let's go down to therapeutic modalities. What's a place where we have no training? Well, I'm seeing CBT, no training there. Seeing not a lot of training for things like motivational interviewing or TFCBT. Bottom line is this, this is the kind of data that's going to help you to develop a PD plan that's sensitive to your current implementation, to what people want to be trained in, to match up with the needs that your district has. Does this make sense to people? This tool is free. It's embedded in the presentation. You're welcome to it. If you want a copy that you can just copy, like copy the whole survey, just contact me. I'll give you a copy of it. And I would recommend administering this to all your mental health providers so you can get a really strong understanding of the full set of services that they offer. Okay, we already looked at that. We already looked at that. I do want to look at staff utilization as it relates to systems and students. I mentioned that there were potential implications of parsing out domains of need early by role. It means that sometimes we're making the assumption that problems sit pretty in one domain when they don't, unfortunately. Kids come with complex problems that bleed into other domains of need. And it's important that we provide comprehensive care as opposed to trying to just address this piece of the problem when there are really 5 other pieces that need to be addressed as well. It's also the case that I don't know how much this fosters some shared learning and teaming. When we parse out domains of need, you could be the only person in your department that's ultimately responsible for the mental health thing. And what does that mean when it's time to consult around crisis? What does that mean when you're trying to make some really good clinical decisions and engage in that peer consultation, but you've got people who are kind of off put by the idea of providing that consultation because that's not my lane. So it's just food for thought. Again, I don't want to tell you what to do. There's no mandate out of this, but I do want to get your wheels turning in how we allocate our staff, how we ultimately position our staff to provide services. Because while it might be somewhat of I guess, it might not appear to be a grave decision, but it could have some pretty significant implications for the student's experience and how they access care in your system. I've also seen this allocating staff to specific tiers. You've got the tier 1 person who's like trying to provide, help to 2,000 kids. Maybe you've got a counselor that only does the IEP services piece, and then you've got tiers 2 and 3, and I don't know, like that could, if you've got a really terrible tier 2 referral system, that person might not have a lot of business, or they might be overwhelmed with tier 3 needs. So again, I point back to the comprehensive staffing model as something that has really worked well for us. And if it works well for you, great. And if it doesn't and you found a different way, then I love it. And I hope you'll share. But again, there are implications to the decisions that we make around allocating people to specific tiers of support and domains of need. What are those implications? Well, think about the student experience and think about the efficiency with which we can provide services and the access to services that our kids experience. Again, that's how we've always done it. Can't be the case. Based on our discussion so far, I've got 12 minutes left and I've got a bunch of slides that we're not going to get to, but I'd love to hear, is there anything that you thought of today? Yes, I will send this, Cynthia. These slides will be made available to you. Is there anything that you've noticed today that has got you thinking about maybe approaching a different way of allocating your staff, of utilizing your staff? Clancy, go for it. Oh, did you not mean to raise your hand?
I did that really quick, but I do have a question. It's sort of related to what you just asked. I'm wondering, as you think of, I mean, there's a lot of this that is helpful, but I'm wondering about balancing sub-separate programs. For example, a social emotional sub-separate program that might have a counseling staff allocated to try to meet that need, but then the complication of students coming in and out of that program ideally, and the fluidity of a staffing model that is more effective. So I
Yeah.
don't know if anyone has experience with that, but that's something I'm wondering, based on that comprehensive model, how that would fit. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It really does make sense, Clancy, and I think you can have both. I think you can still have programmatic staff that are like really, it's like, and we need a staff member for this tier 3 special education program. Okay, that's fine. I would hope that, I guess like in my district, I don't want to pull the other counselor away from that entirely. But I do recognize that there might be some immediate needs all day long, such that it's important that we have a staff member allocated to that tier 3 specialized program. That's okay. I also want to just be open about what happens when maybe there's a wonderful relationship and therapeutic rapport built between a student and a staff member, and we remove that because a student's placed within a program. I've seen situations work out where that staff member can still be associated with that student from a service delivery standpoint, but they also get the added benefit of the programmatic staff. So I think you can have both. I think you can definitely have both. That's a great question, Clancy. Cynthia, this is perfect timing as based on the increased needs our district needs to look at our current model. I'm glad it's helpful, Cynthia. I'm glad it's well timed. It's almost like we did it on purpose. Yeah, we did. We'll move on. We'll cover a little more in the next 10. Are you good with that? Okay. I'm going to jump actually. I'm going to jump all the way to here. This is essential. This is something that there is a dearth of clinical leadership. And I'll say in the state, but I want to really be clear about in the country. Massachusetts is not lagging in this any more than anyone else. It's just the reality that when it comes to clinical leadership and clinical supervision, it's just not a thing that we have invested a tremendous amount of time and energy into. And that's a shame because our staff need that in order to move forward and get the good feedback and to be able to be leveraged effectively, and so that we can build systems to support kids. I mentioned earlier, we've got really well-meaning associate principals that are typically supervising and evaluating clinical staff. That just doesn't work. And it's not fair for them, and they're wonderful people and they're trying their best. But like I said, I'd probably be a pretty terrible department chair for the science department, in the same way that an associate principal just doesn't have the background to necessarily usher into existence a system of support that is in my wheelhouse or in any of your wheelhouses. So it's really critical that we provide this opportunity, clinical supervision, and then I will tag onto that clinical leadership, so that there's a seat at the table when we're making decisions, budgetary decisions, or decisions around how staff are allocated and utilized. Really essential. How do we typically evaluate the effectiveness of school mental health staff? Chelsea, what do you got? Do you have a question?
I did have a question.
Yeah.
In terms of clinical supervision, are the supervisors also the evaluators in this situation?
In my case, it is. So so I supervise and evaluate all of the mental health staff,
Okay.
and I think sometimes I'm gonna guess at what you're thinking maybe, and you tell me if I'm wrong. But like, oh gosh, doesn't that lend itself to maybe a little bit of scariness around like sharing that I don't know what I'm doing? And I had a beautiful conversation with someone who asked a similar question, and they were actually like, I'm scared about sharing with my associate principal that I don't know how to, like, I'm out of kind of options. I need some feedback because I feel like they're gonna think I'm incompetent. When someone tells me on my team that like, hey, John, like I'm stuck here, I don't know what to do with this case, that is a +1 for their evaluation. Why? Because they did the ethical thing of seeking out consultation, of getting good clinical supervision. They did the right thing. The rule is seek supervision, not the exception. So I guess from my perspective, it's not something that lends itself to a bad situation. I actually see it as like, thank you. You are doing the right thing by identifying points at which you need to get another clinical perspective. It's a good thing. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chelsea. That's a good question. In the interest of time, friends, I've heard some strange stuff with this question. I've heard their visibility. I've heard grad rate, dropout rate. I've heard attendance. That's scary. How about this? Products of practice. I hold supervision sessions with my people, and I ask them to show me what you're doing with kids. Show me your treatment plans. Show me your progress monitoring data. Talk to me about your decision to implement this evidence-based practice. Talk to me about your decision to shift your practice. Are you thinking about fading? Because it looks like the data is moving in that direction. How about termination? Are you going, why did you draft this goal in that way? These are the discussions that we have so that we can unpack practice. We ask clarifying and probing questions to understand the why, and then we provide feedback. And you know what? If I say, I really think you should implement this measure, and we make a plan to do it, and the next time you haven't done that thing, that's a conversation. How come you didn't do that thing? It allows for us to have dialogue around practice in a way that moves practice and honors what clinical supervision should look like. Because, friends, it's wildly unethical to sit in on a counseling session. Don't do it. You have to implement true clinical supervision. You can read through this after. These are for you. You're welcome to them. These are templates for treatment plans. These are templates for progress monitoring. There's a great case formulation document that we put together. This is all stuff that promotes reflective practice. It's not about producing evidence. It's about capturing info such that you can reflect back on it and improve your practice. Oh, Gloria. There we go. Excuse me. This is a clinical supervision checklist I put together to drive that conversation. So I'm asking about things like, is the presenting problem clearly defined? How about the scope of the service? Have sessions been scheduled on the Google Calendar so that we're not kind of like ad hoc trying to get it in? It's mapped out in advance because we know that's good for the kids, so they see the island that they have to get to. What about reflective practice? What problems have you been working on with the student? Based on data and observations, is the student making progress? Why or why not? Let's talk about that. This is for you. Take a look at this, but I think that this helps to frame out what those discussions can look like around clinical supervision and case consultants. I know I'm going fast here. I want to get to the end. Okay, one more thing before I get to the end. I want to explain these. These are school mental health services planning and memorialization templates. These are just examples. People ask me for these, so I did produce them. This is just a simple treatment plan. What does it look like? What are you providing for a service? How long is it going to last? When are you going to review progress? Hey, drop your data in here, share it with me, and we'll look at it on an ongoing basis. There are also CBT session guides. I got to tell you, friends, and like they already know I was going to bring this up, but I've got a couple people that will type in every single box here. Don't do that. Oh my God. Like it's not meant for that. Laminate it. It's just a nice guide to be able to help you to reflect on CBT session structure. But I got a couple that type in the box every time. And then lastly, we've got this school small group curriculum-based intervention template. So if you're using more, if it's less therapeutic practices, it's more like social thinking and you're marching through different pieces of curriculum. Yeah, we should memorialize it like this so we can reflect back on it. And then last thing I wanted to show you were these progress monitoring templates. All of these templates are open source. Take them, please. I'm going to show you one real quick. We do have a format for safety plan, Cynthia. Reach out and I'll help you out. So let's make a copy of this real quick. I want to show you how easy this is to use. SCAD7, great tool. So I am going to ultimately open this up. Sorry, it's not being fun. It's not being nice. I think my little computer's a little sad right now. Hold on. Here, I put this one together yesterday. All right, friends, my computer's overworked and it's not feeling it right now. Erin asks, do you require a consent for treatment for students that may not have an IEP? Yeah, what I will do is we've put together some consent forms and we bake into those consent forms. I'm going to do this service, it's going to take this long, and I'm going to use these measures to monitor progress. So it's just one thing. So we have examples of that if you want to take a peek. Let's see if this is still hung up. Yeah, I'm going to close that out. All right. Friends, I think we're at time. I want to open it up for questions. Check out Rennie Center's website if you want to check out upcoming sessions. You can sign up for more. I'm going to stick around for questions, but I recognize it's 5 o'clock and you're probably hungry and tired and you don't want to hear me talk about measurement-based care or anything like that. Thank you for being here. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope it pushed your thinking. I hope it challenged your thinking so that you're walking away with the wheels spinning around how you can consider using your staff. Thank you for doing this work. It's critical. Reach out if we can be helpful. And lastly, yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. It was great to talk to you.